thank you so much, and thank you to you and Patty for opening your beautiful home and letting everyone inside. I guess you guys took pity on everyone. It's a little windy and cold out there, and thank you all so much for being here. I don't want to talk at you for very long, because I'd much rather take all of your questions, as many as I can fit in this afternoon. But let me just say that, let me begin by saying how much I appreciate the people of Iowa. And I'm not saying that to pander or because I'm standing here in Iowa. I'm saying that as a candidate who started out with nobody knowing who I was. You know, when I announced my candidacy on the 4th of May, less than 3% of Republican primary voters had ever heard my name. And the conventional wisdom was, she can't do this. In fact, most of the articles written, if there were any written at all, were kind of about, well, she's never held elected office. She can't possibly be a serious candidate for president. Well, my, how things have changed. And not just for me, but for all of the outsiders in this race. But when I came to Iowa, the people of Iowa took me seriously. And they asked me serious questions, and they listened to the answers. And what I appreciate so much about Iowa is that you take your citizenship seriously. You show up in people's living rooms on a beautiful Friday afternoon to listen to somebody who's running for president. And you're not much influenced by what the pundits say or the fundraising numbers or the polls. You're influenced by what you see and hear and who you meet. And I really appreciate that. My husband Frank was here. I think many of you met him in the video. He was here, I don't know, a couple weeks ago, and came back and said, boy, it was such a great trip to Iowa, and I'm sure he'll be back a lot. Running for president, as you might imagine, it really is a family decision. We have a strong family. Our family has been tested as well. Our family was tested when I battled cancer, and for any of you who have been touched by cancer, you know that it is a family affair. Our family and our faith were tested when we buried our younger daughter. And so when, over the Christmas holidays, at the end of 2014, I started seriously considering running for president, it was a big family conversation about what that would really mean for everyone. For my husband Frank, for our daughter Tracy, and our son-in-law Lowell, and especially for our two granddaughters, Morgan and Kara, who are now 11 and 19. I met Frank 34 years ago, and he brought with him two little girls, Tracy and Lori, who have been a wonderful blessing in my life, particularly because I was unable to have children of my own. And now we have two lovely granddaughters as well. In any event, we had to have a big conversation as a family, and we prayed hard over this decision. But one of the things that prompted me to run for office was two stories I want to tell you. One takes place a long way from here. I don't know how many of you have ever traveled to the slums of New Delhi, but the slums of New Delhi are pretty grim places, and I was there in January because before running for the presidency of the United States, I was the chairman of an organization called Opportunity International. We are the largest private microfinance organization in the world. We have lent $6 billion, $150 at a time, and lifted people out of destitute poverty. So I was in the slums of New Delhi in January to visit with some of our clients. And if you've never been there, it's a long way from Iowa or anywhere else in this country, because you know, you see mountains of trash everywhere, marauding animals, sewage in the streets. People are kind of piled on top of each other. It's a desperate place. And as I climbed a rickety ladder to get to the top of a roof to meet with 10 of our clients, I thought, I'm going to see in their eyes the desperation of their circumstances. And what surprised me was I did not see that at all. I saw hope. I saw determination. I saw focus. And the reason I saw those things in their eyes is because we had done more than give each of these people a $150 loan. We had done more than give them tools or training or support. We had said to them, you have potential. You can make something of your life. You can become an entrepreneur. You can build a better life for yourself and your family. And they were doing so. And they were proud of that. I've learned in the course of my life that everybody has what my mother used to tell me. She said to me on a Sunday morning, what you are is God's gift to you. What you make of yourself is your gift to God. And I've learned that everybody has God-given gifts. Everybody has potential, usually more than they realize. So I thought about, why do I start today in the slums of New Delhi? Because I thought, as I looked at those women, everyone really does have potential. So why is it that more things are more possible for more people from more places here than anywhere else on earth? Why has this nation been a place of limitless possibility for so many? And it's because I think our founders built a nation on this idea that every individual life has value, that we judge individuals as individuals, not as members of groups. And our founders said that everybody has the right to fulfill their potential, to find and use their God-given gifts. That's what they meant when they said the right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. They meant the right to fulfill your potential. And they said the right to do that comes from God and cannot be taken away by government. And so more things have been more possible for more people. I am keenly aware, having traveled all throughout the world, that it's only in this nation that a young woman could start out the way I did, as a secretary, typing and filing for a 9-person real estate firm in the middle of a deep recession, and go on one day to become the chief executive of what we turned into the largest technology company in the world, and run for the presidency of the United States. That's only possible here. You can clap, it's okay. And it's possible because of that idea. So I thought about that when I returned from my trip. And then I thought about a man I had met in New Hampshire, actually, in the summer of 2014. It was a bipartisan group of people. I was giving a speech, and I was talking about human potential. It's the only limitless resource we have. It's the only resource we need to solve every problem. And this man came up to me at the end of my speech, and he said, Carly, we don't think of ourselves as a nation of limitless possibility anymore. And I thought, how true, and how sad. Because when we don't think of ourselves as a nation of limitless possibility anymore, we are losing the core of who we are. We always thought that if something were important to do, we would do it in this country. If it were hard to do, even better, we'd figure out how to do it. And we always knew, we just knew that our children and our grandchildren's lives were going to be filled with more possibilities than our own lives. And yet Americans don't believe that anymore. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is a pivotal point in our nation's history. 75% of the American people now think the federal government is corrupt. 82% of the American people now think we have a professional political class that cares more about its power, position, and privilege than actually getting anything done. And I am running for the presidency of the United States not only because I agree with those people. I'm running for the presidency of the United States because I think the truth is we have come to a point in our nation, a pivotal point in our nation's history, where the possibilities for too many Americans, indeed the potential of this great nation, is being crushed by a government that has grown so big, so powerful, so costly, so complicated, so inept, and so corrupt, and a professional political class that refuses to do anything about it. The system is broken, ladies and gentlemen. Politics is broken, government is broken. And that broken system is harming people. Not the big, not the powerful, not the wealthy, and not the well-connected. Because if you're a big company, or you're a powerful special interest, or you're wealthy or well-connected, guess what? You can hire all the people necessary to make that broken system work for you. You can hire the accountants, the lawyers, the lobbyists. But if you're small, if you're powerless, you're getting crushed. Whether it's the family-owned farm in Iowa that's suddenly now being told by the EPA that the EPA controls the water, or whether it's the small business owner who finally just gives up because the 73,000-page tax code is too heavy for you, or whether you're someone who has had their life so tangled up in a web of dependence that you can't get out of that web even if you try, or whatever your problem is that you hope would be resolved by now, it hasn't gotten fixed, has it? I mean, how often do we talk about the same things over and over and over in every presidential cycle? What do we talk about? Immigration, tax reform, Social Security reform, reforming the VA. When we talk about the same things and yet it never gets better, it's all getting worse. That's the truth. It's all getting worse. It reminds me of the difference between management and leadership. You see, managers are people who do the best they can within the system. They don't challenge the system. They operate within the system. And if you're operating within a broken system, what happens? You just kind of tinker around the edges of problems. You don't ever really get them solved because you won't ever challenge the status quo. Managers don't challenge the status quo. They operate within it. And there are managers in business, and there are managers in life, and there are loads of managers in politics. Leaders are altogether different than managers. Leaders challenge the status quo. It's the only way you solve festering problems. It is the only way you produce results. Leaders challenge the status quo, solve problems, and produce results. I think, citizens, we need to take our government back. I think we need to remember ours was intended to be a citizen government. I think we need a leader in the White House who's going to work with the citizens of this great nation and finally challenge the status quo and get these festering problems solved. None of them are rocket science. They just take a different kind of leadership and a truly engaged citizenship. So I'm running for the presidency of the United States because we're at a pivotal point. I'm running for the presidency of the United States because I believe this must be a nation of limitless possibility once again. I'm running for the presidency of the United States because I believe every American has to feel that their life is filled with the possibilities that come from their God-given gifts. I'm running for the presidency because I think I'm the most qualified candidate to win this job. And to win this job is going to take a real fight. Many of you maybe haven't made up your mind yet who you want to support, but even if you're still shopping, you know in your heart of hearts, particularly after watching Tuesday night's debate, that you cannot wait to see me debate Hillary Clinton. We also need somebody who could do the job now, and I will close on this. Think objectively about what it takes to do the job of the President of the United States in 2017, a real complicated time in our nation and in our world. Well, here's what I think it takes. Somebody who actually understands how the economy works, because that's the only way we're going to get it going again. Somebody who understands the world and who's in it and how it works. And I know more world leaders on the stage today than anyone running, with the possible exception of Hillary Clinton, only I didn't do a photo op with Vladimir Putin. I had a private meeting. Or King Abdullah of Jordan, or Bibi Netanyahu of Israel, or the Chinese leadership. I've held the highest clearances available to a civilian. I've chaired the advisory board of the CIA. I've advised the NSA, the CIA, 2 secretaries of defense, a secretary of state, and a secretary of homeland security. And I know that when we do not lead in the world's a very dangerous and a very tragic place. And when we do not stand with our allies and confront our adversaries, our allies lose courage and our adversaries press forward. We need a president who understands bureaucracies and how to hold them accountable and cut them down to size. Because realistically, our government has become one giant, bloated, unaccountable, inept bureaucracy, and we have fed it more money year after year after year for 50 years. And there is no consequence for dereliction of duty in the federal government. We need a president who understands technology, because technology is a fantastic tool. that can be used to hold bureaucracies accountable, to re-engage citizens in their government, but it's also a weapon that is being used against them. And we better have somebody who understands how to deal with that. And finally, we need a president who understands leadership. You know, when I was a secretary, I used to think that a leader was somebody who had a big office, the best parking space, perks, the title. You know, that made you a leader. And then I got older and wiser, and I discovered there were a lot of people with big offices, big titles, big egos, who were not leading. A leader challenges the status quo. And the highest calling of leadership is to unlock potential in others. We don't need, as Margaret Thatcher once said, we don't need to keep managing the decline of a great nation. That is what we have been doing for way too long. What we need now is a leader who will, with the citizens of this nation, lead our resurgence. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, you wanted to ask the question before, and I told him to hold it for Q&A, because others might like to hear it.
Okay, well, yeah, my question actually, first of all, thanks for sharing that story about your time in India. That's really inspiring. If elected president, you know, you're going to come into a position where there are a lot of aid programs going on, not all of which you're going to support. So one of those programs is the Global Fund to Fight AIDS, TB, and Malaria, and that's a program that actually has saved every month about 100,000 people. And it doesn't do this by just giving our money to other people. We put our money out there and we use that to leverage it to get other wealthy countries to put money in as well. And then all together, we partner with countries that are suffering and ask them to really take ownership of
So you want me to support this program?
Well, I'm curious if you'll support it.
Just a guess.
If you'll support it, you know, as we do now, the United States only puts in 1/3. And if you'll also look at that as a model for other programs you might support for foreign aid. Sorry for the long question.
Yeah. The honest answer is this. First, public-private partnerships are very important in economic development, in disease eradication, and all forms of foreign aid. And in fact, if you looked at the data today, I shared a policy effort on economic development and foreign aid a couple years ago. Over 80% of the money that goes into successful programs comes from the private sector, not the public sector. And in many cases, there are organizations in the private sector that are very effective. The Gates Foundation, Bono's One Fund. I mean, these are private sector efforts that are effective and that governments should be partnering with, including their own government. What I will promise you is that we will conduct a top-to-bottom review of every single dollar we spend. And the programs that work, I'm prepared to invest more in. And the programs that don't work, we're going to get rid of. And why do I say a top-to-bottom review? Because think about this reality. The federal government spends more money each and every year and has done so for 50 years under Republicans and Democrats alike. That's a fact, what I just said. And yet the federal government never has enough money to do the important things. Have you ever noticed that? Every time we want the federal government to do something, well, we need more foreign aid for the AIDS eradication. We need to secure the border. We need to repair our roads and bridges. We need to reform the VA. We need to answer taxpayer questions on tax day. The answer always is, oh, sorry, we don't have enough money. How can it be possible that the government spends more every year and never has enough? How is that possible? The only way that's possible is that we never examine what we're spending. In fact, we don't know what we're spending. We don't know where our money is being spent. It's why one of the first things I will do is go, with your help, because you will have to help me pressure Congress, and I hope you'll ask me how. We have to go to some version of zero-based budgeting, where we literally examine every dollar every year. Because today we don't do it that way. You go to an appropriations hearing, you never talk about all the money. Never. You just talk about the rate of increase over last year's money. So you never examine, is this money working? Are we spending it wisely? Well, no. So we have to do a top-to-bottom review of every dollar, every year, so we can invest more where it makes sense, spend less overall, which we absolutely have to do, spend less, not more. And the only way to do that is to know where our money is going. One last thing on this. Isn't it amazing how few government programs actually have any goals at all? Or any consequence at all? We just learned in the Inspector General's report, there are more and more, if you read Inspector General reports regularly, I do, you learn incredible things. We just learned that the government has paid out to the wrong people for the wrong reasons. It's called fraud. $1 trillion over the last decade. Think about that. $1 trillion. Is there any consequence at all for that? No. No. Nothing happens. We can't, this is why I say we gotta take our government back. We can't go on like this. So in addition to zero-based budgeting and knowing where every dollar is being spent and examining every single dollar, we have to have consequence for non-performance. You know, you can't just be derelict in your duty and hang on to your paid pension and benefits for the rest of your life. And that's what we've got going in the federal government. We have to go to some version of a meritocracy.
And that actually is an aspect of the global fund. Everything is tracked.
I'm impressed that you are so excited about this.
Yeah.
So, yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I have a very simple question. When you become our president, you no longer are a Republican or a Democrat.
That's right.
You are our president. And in this room are people with serious issues. You're right about Iowa. We're glad you're here. We're very serious. We have educational issues. We have health issues. We have senior issues. We have young people that we want to make sure their lives are good. How will you, as our president, bring everybody to the table who do not agree with your views on certain items? How will you get, because for 20 years, I traveled to Washington, D.C. as a councilwoman, and every year things were promised, both sides, but then they never got voted in. So how will you make that difference?
So first of all, that's not a simple question at all. But it's a really important question. So let me just go back for a moment to the data that I cited, because it is the basis of consensus. 75% of the American people think the federal government is corrupt. What does that mean? Democrats, independents, Republicans, 82 young, old, men, women, 82% of the American people think we have a professional political class. What does that mean? Republicans, Democrats, independents, young, old, men, women, every ethnicity. The American people actually have found consensus. The system is broken and I'm getting taken advantage of. Right? So let us build on that. Now, let me give you an example of how I'm going to build on that. First of all, we have to explain things, I think, to the American people, not in partisan terms, in practical terms. So let me use an example, education. I'm against Common Core. Why am I against Common Core? I'm against Common Core because however it started, what it's turned into is more money getting spent on a bureaucratic program in Washington, D.C. Bureaucracies only know one way, especially when they're given unlimited money. It's called heavy-handed interference. It's the nature of bureaucracy. So, if you look at the facts and the data, see, so much of our political dialogue becomes partisan and it doesn't need to be. If you look at the data, what you'll find is that the Department of Education has spent more money each and every year for 40 years. And the quality of our education has continued to decline. So if you're a practical person, what do you conclude? Spending in the Department of Education has nothing to do with the quality of education. What does have to do with the quality of education? Every parent knows this answer. Every teacher in the front of the classroom and an involved parent. That's what has to do with a good education. So everything we do should be focused on, let's make sure we got great teachers in front of the classroom, and let's make sure we have involved parents, which means you give parents choices. Parents' choices so their kids have chances. Now, what I just went through, it's not a partisan discussion. It's a practical discussion. How are we going to get it done? Very important question. All right, this is confession time, folks. How many of you in this room still own a flip phone? There are a lot of flip phones here tonight. Okay. Okay, good. You have about 15 months to upgrade. You must get a smartphone. Yes, but I want to tell you why, okay? Yes, you do. I'm going to tell you why you need one, okay? So you asked, how are we going to get people to move? Look, we know politicians move when confronted with pressure from their constituents, particularly when it's bipartisan pressure. Remember the VA scandal in Arizona? Remember how outraged the American people were? And so what did Congress do? In 3 weeks, proving they can do something. In 3 weeks, Congress passed a bipartisan bill that said we could fire the top 400 senior executives of the VA. Amazing. Obama signed it. Passes the Senate 99-0. Of course, only one person's been fired. The situation has gotten worse, not better, but it proves the point. The pressure works. So why the smartphone? Because once a week, I'm going to go into the Oval Office. There's something called the weekly radio address, and I will ask you to take out your smartphones. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you think we should know where your money is being spent? Do you think federal government bureaucracy should have to justify every dollar, every year? Do you think we should prioritize our money? Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. This technology exists. Press 1 for yes, 2 for no. Do you think when 307,000 veterans die in the last year before receiving health care, which is the fact, that somebody in the VA better lose their job? Press 1 for yes,
Why?
2 for no.
Why?
Exactly. 75% of the American people think the government is corrupt. I am betting that we're going to have a whole bunch of people, Democrats, Independents, and Republicans, press hell yes, 1. Pardon my French. That's how we're going to start where there's common ground. And there's plenty of common ground. That's where we need to start. I also think one last thing on this. I do think we need to expose what progressives really believe. Because progressives, and a lot of Democrats are not progressives, but the Democrat Party is becoming the progressive party. You asked about education. I am reminded of the head of the Chicago Public Teachers Union, who went on strike, the issue was teacher accountability, said this: we cannot be held accountable for the performance of students in our classroom because too many of them are poor and come from broken families. That isn't what I believe. It's not what you believe. It's not what the vast majority of Americans believe. But what she was saying basically was, if you're poor and you come from a broken family, you can't learn and I don't have to teach you. And you see, I think the core of a progressive philosophy is some are smarter than others, some are better than others, it's okay, some are going to take care of others. And I don't think Americans agree with that.
About housing. And so I want to know some views on your thoughts on housing. I mean, it's somewhere around 17% of GDP. And we're doing little things to it, like the bill that's in Congress right now that is asking to take the guarantee fees from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac and pull them off and use them for transportation for some reason. So I want to get just a gist of housing and your thoughts on it.
That's typical with government too,
I know,
isn't it?
I know it is.
Isn't it? Never mind, we're just going to start moving money around in a lawless fashion. So first, let's think back. How did the real estate bubble get created? By Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. Two government-sponsored entities supported by Republicans and Democrats alike. And Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, because politicians said, you know what, everybody should own a home, and we're going to get the government into the business of making sure everybody owns a home. That isn't the government's business. They create this tremendous bubble. Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac sell it all off to Wall Street. And remember, you know, everyone, it's amazing how people forget common sense and good judgment when they're making money. You know, common sense and good judgment would tell you what goes up must come down. Reminds me of the dot-com bubble. Oh no, it makes total sense that stocks are being priced at 2,000 times forward earnings with no chance of profitability. Remember Chuck Prince at Citigroup famously said, we're going to keep dancing till the music stops? Well, the music stopped. What was this administration's response? Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac have never been reformed, right? No. We had 25 government agencies that were supposed to be minding the store. They all still exist. They're all still doing whatever they were doing. And meanwhile, we've passed a new bill called Dodd-Frank. And the consequence of Dodd-Frank, which was written by the Wall Street banks, is what? 10 Wall Street banks, too big to fail, have become 5, even bigger, more powerful Wall Street banks. And meanwhile, 1,700 community banks have gone out of business. And why does that matter? Because 1,700 community banks, that's where people who want to buy a house from you, most of them go to get their loan. And community banks don't have access to capital anymore, or they don't exist, and so it's gotten harder, much harder for people to take out a loan to buy a house. It's gotten much harder for a small business owner to take out a loan to build his business. That $150, if you can't get credit, you can't grow a business. So the consequence of all this government intervention has been bigger problems. And on top of all that, we created this thing called most Americans, many Americans don't know this, we created this vast new bureaucracy called the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. It is by statute, Congress has no authority to oversee this bureaucracy. So no one's minding the store. And that bureaucracy, as you know, is going in and examining hundreds of millions of mortgage applications and credit card applications to make sure that they find any evidence of fraud. Now, I want to tell you what, I know a lot of people in the business of home mortgages who are saying, I'm going to put out of business by this. I can't get through this bureaucracy anymore. So that makes your industry weaker, not strong. And oh, by the way, I got to tell you what, we had all of this controversy over the NSA. I am very much afraid of an unaccountable federal government bureaucracy who is combing through the most personal records of consumers in this nation, gathering up all this information. What are they doing with it? And how do we know it's going to be protected? The Office of Personnel Management got hacked into pretty easily, didn't it? So all of this that was supposed to make your industry better has made your industry worse. So we got to get rid of Dodd-Frank. We got to get rid of the Consumer Finance Protection Bureau. Actually, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, the government shouldn't be in the business of home mortgages. We need to put this back out into a competitive financial system, because people who can own a home and should own a home ought to be able to get the capital to do it. One last thing I would say. You know, I've said a couple times that big, complicated, powerful government favors the wealthy and the well-connected. And so does Federal Reserve policy. So the Federal Reserve has been running along on this zero interest rate policy for 6 years now. It hasn't worked. I mean, our economy continues to underperform because we're crushing job creators, which are small businesses and family-owned businesses and farms. But the impact of a 0% interest policy, yes, it makes mortgage cheaper up to a point. But if you're a young couple trying to save for your first house, you can't get anywhere because you don't earn anything on those things. If you're a retiree, you're not earning anything on those things. If you're a middle-class family trying to put money away in the bank account, you're not earning anything. If you're a member of the investment class, if you're invested in the stock market, you're doing all right. If you're invested in real estate, you're doing all right. Once again, the small and the powerless are getting harmed, and the wealthy are getting helped by the zero interest rate policy. Did I answer your question?
Pretty much, yeah. We could go on and on.
Yes.
I know you're a very successful businesswoman, and so I'm wondering if you think a business should be able to deny services to LGBT people because they're LGBT.
No, I don't. But I also think that the government cannot impose its view of what people and how people should practice their religious liberty. You know, religious liberty honestly is under assault in this country. It truly is. And people are afraid that their government is going to tell them how to practice their religious liberty. So as a CEO, we provided benefits to all same-sex couples. We had very clear codes of conduct to make sure that anyone could bring all of themselves to work and be valued for that. But I must say, we have come to a place in this country where people who hold more traditional views are being punished for their personal views. And that isn't right either.
Carly, I have a question. My name is Diane Joseph. I'm a pastor at Unity Evangelical Lutheran Church with my twin sister. We grew up in Chicago. My dad's a Chicago policeman, which was a huge success because my grandma escaped jihad and other relatives in 1916 under the Turk and Kurd invasion of Persia, which is now Iran. We are going to receive in our nation maybe, I guess, 80,000 to 100,000 Muslims, and God bless, many of them are very nice, I'm not disagreeing. But no Christians, I believe, are being received. In fact, I even heard on the radio that some Christians are going to be sent back. They would love being in a nation, a Judeo-Christian nation, and the Constitution. They understand what Sharia law is all about. Assyrian Christian children have been buried alive, and other Christians buried alive, crucified, raped. And I just don't understand our presidency, and it just seems rather strange, the favoritism of set groups, but Christians are being annihilated. What would you do as, God bless you, thank you for being here, Carly.
Well, first, I could not agree with you more. And in fact, last night at an event, I said, first of all, let us be realistic. John Kerry, thank you, John Kerry. He stands up and says, oh, we're going to accept 100,000 Syrian refugees. Look, our heart breaks when we see these pictures, but realistically, most of these refugees are young, able-bodied men. And we do not know who they are. And John Kerry will be long gone when the next president is dealing with that. So the first thing I would do is immediately open that decision for review. Because it's one thing to provide amnesty when someone is truly being politically or religiously persecuted. It's another thing to allow tens of thousands of able-bodied men into this country because they're looking for work. We do not have a moral obligation to do that. And yes, I commented just last night on the fact that it's amazing to me that the Syrian refugee crisis finally moved this administration to action when Christians are being persecuted, driven from their homes, annihilated, crucified, burned, all of the things that you mentioned, and this administration has not said a word. It is a little bit like, to me, this president, unfortunately, he picks and chooses his tragedies. He picks which tragedies to comment on. But I haven't heard, you mentioned that your dad was a policeman. I haven't heard this president commenting very often on the tragedy of police officers being assassinated in their cars because they wear the uniform. We have to be even-handed. We need to use the rules of amnesty carefully. Political asylum for people who truly are being persecuted, either politically or religiously. We have to use the rules of asylum in an even-handed way. And there are many Christians who deserve asylum in this country, clearly, as much as anyone else. And we have to be realistic. If we do not know who we are letting into this country, we have to secure our borders, we have to fix our legal immigration system, but if we have no way of really knowing who these people are, we cannot let them in, because they are coming from a very dangerous part of the world. The asylum process is so exhaustive that we end up knowing who people are.
And being that you know much about world issues, I'm sure you could probably encourage other Muslim nations to take some of these individuals.
Well, and by the way,
give
yes.
some humanitarian.
And by the way, what we should, to your point, the efforts we should be leading now, that I will lead as president, we should be leading a humanitarian relief effort.
Yes.
This refugee crisis is entirely predictable. When the world becomes more dangerous, when the world becomes more tragic, and the world becomes more dangerous and tragic when the United States fails to lead, then people are on the move. And the UN estimates that 42 million people are being driven out of their homes. It's all over this misery. So we can lead humanitarian efforts, but we can also lead efforts to stop human trafficking. Because human trafficking has become an industry. It's an industry. These people are not just picking up one day and saying, I think I'm going to go to Europe. They are being preyed upon by human traffickers who take their hard-earned money, who promise them a nirvana, and who set them on the move. And then we find out the horrific journeys these people go through. Lord knows what happens to the women and children along the way. And remember that van that they found in Europe with 72 people who literally suffocated in the van? Human trafficking is a scourge. And we can take the lead in helping to stop it, and that will help stop the movement of some of these people.
Thank you. God bless you.
Way to go.
Carly, I believe everything you're saying. So when you're elected president of the United States,
So that means you're gonna caucus for me, right?
Yes.
Okay.
raise your hand, say, "I do," and then they throw you in the ocean with all the fish and politicians and bureaucrats. What's the first thing you're gonna do when you get out of the ocean and start being president of the United States?
Okay, well, actually, there are three things, three categories of things, all right? The first will be to make two phone calls. The first phone call will be to my good friend Bibi Netanyahu, to reassure him that we will stand with the state of Israel always. And the second phone call will be to the supreme leader of Iran. He might not take my phone call, but he will get my message. And the message is this: New Deal. New deal with the new president. Until and unless you open every military facility, every nuclear facility to real anytime, anywhere inspections by our people, not yours, we, the United States of America, will make it as difficult as possible for you to move money around the global financial system. We must stop the money flow, because the money, hundreds of billions of dollars, is being used to build up the military, build nuclear capability, and foment dissent, conflict, murder, and mayhem in the region, now joined by Russia. Why those two phone calls on day one? Because every ally we have and every adversary we have will take note of those phone calls and say, I guess the United States of America is back in the leadership business. We need a real reset. Second thing I will do, it's in the category of starting to lift the burden off this economy. I'm going to start rolling back a whole set of rules that this president rolled out. We are no longer a nation of laws. We are a nation of rules. Rules just come rolling out. The waters of the U.S., right? Yeah. The EPA now controls 99% of the groundwater here in Iowa. How do you suppose that's going to work out? Not very well. Rules. EPA rules. NLRB rules. The National Labor Relations Board decides on its own that the 100-year-old definition of the relationship between a franchisor and a franchisee is going to change. You know, that franchisor-franchisee model has created a lot of small business entrepreneurs in this country, but no, the NLRB said, no, we don't like that, we're going to change it. They roll out rules. The FCC rolled out 400 pages of rules over the internet. One of the most dynamic segments of our economy. Let's have 400 pages of rules. These are just rules. Who are these people? They're elected by no one. They're accountable to no one. No one has any oversight over it. So I'm going to roll all that back. Third, by the way, I have been encouraging Congress. They have not done so yet. Hopefully they will do so when I am in the Oval Office. But I have been encouraging Congress to pass something called the REINS Act. The REINS Act would give Congress the authority, the accountability to oversee every new rule, so that we just don't have agencies who go back to throwing rules out there just because they feel like it. And it's always in the pursuit of ideology, by the way, never in pursuit of a practical objective. Third, we're going to start this press 1 for yes, 2 for no, because we have to undertake some really systematic reforms now. We have to understand where our money is being spent so that we can spend less overall and still invest in those things that the government must do well. And we have to move as well, quickly, to a meritocracy, because we cannot continue to endure a system in which, for example, a government hands out $1 trillion in the wrong payments to the wrong people, or 307,000 veterans die before they ever receive health care. We could go on and on and on with the ineptitude and the corruption, and there is no consequence. We cannot continue to allow that to happen. So, press 1 for yes, 2 for no. It's going to happen real soon. Gotcha. All right, we have time for one last question. Yes, ma'am.
Social Security and Medicare, is there anything we can do besides sending seniors on Medicaid?
Yes, there are many things that can be done. And in fact, this is one of those examples to me of the failure of politicians to ever follow through. Because how often do we talk about Social Security and Medicare? We talk about it every election cycle. Every election cycle, and people roll out their plans, and nothing happens. And you know why nothing happens? Because actually, to get something to happen, you gotta take on a very serious conversation with the American people, while of course guaranteeing that we fulfill the contracts that we've made to people who are counting on that money. But honestly, I'm not gonna start there. I'm gonna start by rebuilding people's faith in the basic competence and responsiveness of their government and their political process. Because if we cannot do the basics, if we can't do the basics of ensuring that $1 trillion worth of money isn't fraudulently paid out to people who haven't earned it, if we can't do the basics of making sure that every dollar of your money is spent wisely and well, why should you trust that the government and the political process can tackle a really complicated issue? I don't trust this percent. So where I'm going to start is the 30% of the federal budget, and by the way, that is a huge number. You'll hear politicians say, oh, well, it's only 30%. Can you imagine running your family budget that way? Or running your business budget that way? Oh, it's only 30%. Never mind, it doesn't matter. Of course it matters. We're going to start by making sure that we have basic competence and accountability in how government and the political process operates. And when we have begun to restore the citizens' faith in their citizen government, then I will come to the American people and say, you know what, we got binders full of ideas about how to reform Social Security. That's the truth, by the way. There are binders full of great ideas about how to reform Social Security. And let's talk about it. And let's decide, because we have technology that can help citizens get engaged in how to decide that. But boy, oh boy, I'm not tackling that until we demonstrate that government and the political process can be responsive and accountable and accept.
How can we help you?
Okay, how can we help?
you spread the word?
All right, here's what you can do to help. And I'm feeling the gentle hook. First, talk to everybody you know. This is how it happens, right? You talk to everybody you know. Please go out of here and say, hey, I listened to Carly Fiorina. Hopefully you're going to say, hey, I'm caucusing for her. She's awesome. If you're not quite ready to say that, hopefully you all are, at least say, listen to her, pay attention to her. Because a lot of people still haven't really, they don't know much about it. Secondly, if you're signed on and signed up and you want to caucus for me, then help sign others up. Third, you know, campaigns need fuel. So if you're inclined to give us fuel, that means money. Whatever you can afford, that'd be awesome, because it costs money to run campaigns. I will just leave you with this thought. You know, a lot, of course, rests on the candidate's shoulder. But everything worthwhile is a big team effort. And running for president is the biggest team effort of them all. And so people are most influenced by people they know. You know a lot of people. Every single one of you know a lot of people, and you influence a lot of people. So I'd love to have you on the team, using your influence with the people you know. There's only one thing that's bigger, a bigger team effort than running for president. The bigger team effort is going to be taking our government back and restoring a citizen government. That is what we were intended to do. So once you help me get there, I hope you'll help me take it back. Upgrade that phone, sir. Thank you all so much.